I wanted to answer a few questions concerning resource types. Often, folks think that they are using what we would call a scholarly source, only to find out that they are not using a scholarly source. This is a very particular kind of resource. So, sometimes instructors, meaning well, will refer to certain kinds of sources as scholarly, but by definition, it is not. And so I'm going to base what we are calling scholarly on the Chamberlain University Research Basics Resource Types webpage. So if you go to library.chamberlain.edu/research/resource types, you will come to this page. And right here in a simple table, we see scholarly, popular, and trade. And so based on these three categories, we can determine if a resource is indeed scholarly or not. But I can already tell you the best way to know if a resource is scholarly is if it's in an academic journal. Because academic journals are written by scholars for scholars. It's part of speaking to a designated audience of professionals in the field, scholars, written by professionals in the field who are scholars, and they're using some specialized language. They're using specialized methodology, which is what qualifies them as scholars in this sense. They're following a very strict set of rules about the kind of information they provide and the style that it's presented and the audience in which they are presenting to. So if you think it's scholarly, but it's from a website, almost 99% of the time, it is not scholarly. Now, this isn't because websites are completely unreliable. It's not that at all. But if we're going to go by the definition of scholarly, it kind of has to be in this very narrow definition. Besides journal articles, you can also refer to university press publications. So just about every big name university that we could think of, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, these companies, they are companies really because they're publishing companies, but they're basing their publications on the ongoing research in the field. So, if you pick up a text from Pennsylvania State University Press, Penn State Press, it's going to be some scholar's work, someone probably who is working somewhere in the Penn State network in one of their universities as a professor, so they're going to have a PhD. Some scholars don't have PhDs, but that's not really the point, because that's where I think we get confused. So also at times we find websites that are written by people who have doctorate degrees in their field, and they're highly qualified, but they may not have written it intending to speak to other professionals. Their work may not have been peer reviewed or kind of, checked by other professionals in the field. In fact, their target audience is normal folks, just regular people who want to know more about something in a particular academic discipline. And so in that case, it's very general. The information is very, accessible and understandable and relatable to the wider popular culture, the general, audience. So keep that in mind that even if it ends in .edu or .gov, that doesn't necessarily qualify it as scholarly. And again, these websites are great. In fact, you should use them. But if on a rubric it says that you have to use a scholarly source in addition to your textbook and your weekly readings or lesson, that website can be numbered among your references, use it, but you need a scholarly source. That's what the rubric's saying, is having basically at least one scholarly source used in your initial post on the discussion board. We also have what we would call trade publications, which, again, they're written by professionals, people that know what they're talking about. But again, their audience is kind of geared toward the business side of things. So when we say scholarly, it's a very narrow definition. It's academics writing to academics. And then we come along as students and we get to sort of sit in on the conversation, so to speak. And that's what these publications are about. Every journal article that you read is like, imagine that it's a scholar giving a lecture to a group of scholars. And we as students in a discipline like humanities or history or art history or something, we get to kind of come alongside and understand what they're saying to each other, bring it in to bolster and support things that we're talking about in our writing, as a way to add some substance to substantiate what we're saying, what we're writing about in our discussion post. And by doing so, you add a level or a layer of credibility. You add a layer of trustworthiness and authority to what you're saying, because you're using these scholars, what they're writing, to bolster what you're saying, to back up what you're saying. So, I hope this helps. Again, websites, there are some websites out there that have scholarly sources on them. So they do exist. But generally they are electronic publications of a journal. And so some websites, their entire journal is like what we would call an e-journal. So it goes through the same stringent process of peer review and scholars writing for scholars, methodology, and all those things, but they only exist online. They don't actually print it. What we're getting when we search in the database, and I'll go ahead and point you to that because I think that's really the most important thing. If you want to know how to find scholarly sources, come to this link here, and which is the landing page for the library. And so, as it says here, you can search everything, or you can limit it to journal articles. In fact, Chamberlain has taken an extra measure here to limit your results when you search in this box to things written by scholars in the last 5 years, because that's important, especially in APA. If you've ever noticed how APA uses the year in the in-text citation, that's their primary focus, because when it comes to, well, in the case of the American Psychological Association, up-to-date, current, recent research holds much more weight than outdated research. And so we use this in the sciences and the social sciences because, as you know, those who are studying science and nursing and everything else, healthcare, things change and technology changes and results change and theories become outdated and new theories come along. So APA is concerned with having the most recent resources used in your writing. So Chamberlain has given us this awesome search window under journal articles that limits things to the last 5 years. So if we were just to search Doric, let's see what comes up here. I could have done this beforehand. We would have had a little bit more of a seamless presentation here if I had done that, but I didn't. So let's see what we get. And this should give us full text, scholarly resources. Doric columns are not falling, wedding cakes, the menstrual exception, and the public-private distinction. Anyway, so, and I'm not sure if any of these are actually helpful for anything we would be doing in our class, but just to give you an example, This has given us a recent, within the last 5 years, result. So to clarify and restate, scholarly is a very narrow definition. And that definition has to do with scholars presenting original research within a professional field, written by professionals, for other researchers, and usually these are almost always going to be journal publications, journals, academic journals. The other exception is academic press. If something is published by an academic press, then you know that it's scholarly. There are other publication houses out there that have academic in the name, and those two would be considered scholarly. But really, a good way to know is if it's got a ton of footnotes and a ton of in-text citations, and it's written in the third-person objective, and it's kind of dry, a little bit boring probably. It's scholarly. So avoid websites really altogether, as far as counting them as scholarly in your sample of results that you're going to reference. Now, you can use those websites. There's nothing against them. Use them. Use ancient.eu. I shouldn't say this, but heck, use Wikipedia. I mean, it's the devil in the academic world, because there's no referee, there's no watchman on the wall to help, so to speak. So anybody can contribute to Wikipedia. That's why it's not considered 100% reliable, trustworthy, or credible in every case. But you can use these websites. You can use Khan Academy. You can use ancient.eu. You can use reference to the Met Museum. That's fine. You're not limited to how many sources you have, but among the sources that you do use, according to the rubric, there has to be something scholarly in that reference list, quoted directly in your initial post in response to the prompt. So I hope this helps. If you have questions, contact your instructor. If you have questions about how to use the database, your instructors can help with that. Refer to the library. They also know how to point you in the right direction to make sure you can even text the librarians. But I recommend, if you've never just browsed the library.chamberlain.edu website, do so. Go for it. There's tons of information. There's APA videos that show you how to properly cite. So really, there's very little excuse why folks don't master APA in this class, in your humanities class, because it's part of the grading criteria in the rubric, and it's really very simple. And there's a lot of assistance on the library website, so I recommend turning to those resources. Use them. They're there to help you, and they will help you. And nobody is born with this knowledge. This is what we learn as we go. The more you study, the more you move along in your degree program, you become a better researcher. And this is really knowing the rules, knowing the definitions, knowing the way the academic world works. This is part of building those critical thinking skills that are going to help you in life forever. Even though you may never research an art history project again. But knowing how to find the right information and understanding why it's considered superior to other forms of information out there. We live in an age where information literacy is very important. So yes, this is a narrow definition of what we mean when we say scholarly, in terms of credibility, in terms of reliability, trustworthiness, authority. Got to know this stuff. So I hope this helps. Good luck.